My name is Josiah Smith. I'm a PA functional medicine practitioner and owner of Holistic Hormone Solutions. And this is my good friend, Roger Drummer. And you'd like to give yourself a quick little introduction?
Yes. Hi, I'm Roger, and I am the owner of HerbWorks.com and a diplomat of Chinese herbology. I specialize in stress, and I make formulas for brain function and offsetting stress.
Very nice. And talking about stress, we are going to discuss specifically what you do. We're going to talk about adaptogens, the history, and how everyone that's watching can utilize adaptogens into their daily routine and upregulating whatever health function that they may be lacking.
Well, adaptogens are something that I'm extremely fascinated about. In fact, I've switched my whole business over to just making formulas for stress because of adaptogens. Adaptogens are a new class of herbs. They've probably been around in this country maybe 15 years. And they're what I call nature's perfect food, because an adaptogen is basically there to help your nervous system adapt to stress. And this is what all experts will tell you is the cause of 80% of all illness is stress. And your inability to be able to flow into stress and flow back out to let go of it, and the inability of your body to hold on to energy during stress. And this is what adaptogens are for. They're basically herbs that are tuned in to your nervous system, especially the HPA axis. So they strengthen all those glands so that your body can have a healthy stress response without getting worn out, and then move in and out of that response and stay in a healthy state of energy.
Sure. So let's define, first of all, we know what adaptogens are. Now let's talk about the stress response very briefly and what exactly is the HPA axis and how that may coordinate a lot of other body functions.
Right. Well, if you're probably having one body function that dominates your everyday life, it's the stress response. And the HPA axis stands for hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal. That's kind of the triangle of your glandular system that's involved in the response. Your hypothalamus, sensing a danger, sends a signal to your pituitary. It activates your nervous system, your sympathetic nervous system, and then it activates your adrenals. And so this response then puts you into fight or flight, meaning that you're ready to either run away from danger or to fight danger. And that's the response your body has dozens of times every single day at different levels. Your body gets primed up, you get ready to fight or flight, and then you're locked into that stress response.
Yeah, and it's interesting is when we look in the biochemistry with this, a lot of people, there's this fascinating term called adrenal fatigue. Okay.
Right.
And I just want to get some clarification. This is a misnomer. It was popularized during the 1990s, but if you look in PubMed in the literature, it does not exist. It is not supported. So what is a better term for this? HPA axis dysregulation, hypocortisolism. So it's a dysfunction, and it comes to brain chemistry. It's not, actually not a weakening or a fatigability of the adrenal glands, but it's from the sensory output from the brain to the adrenals, and that cortisol output, and also the adrenaline and the noradrenaline, which is the first thing that's actually released in response to a stressful event.
Right, and so everybody's familiar with cortisol and the stress hormone, and you can have low cortisol, excessive cortisol. All these things have to do with your stress response, your inability of your body to regulate itself. And this is what's so important about the HPA axis and stress, is that it's the loss of your body's ability to regulate normal functions, what they call homeostasis, that leads to all these issues with your health related to stress. So when you regulate that, basically what you're saying that you're doing with adaptogenic herbs is giving your herbs food that make them healthier and allow them to do their natural process. Your natural process is to have a stress response And when the stressor's over, move on and let your body secrete different hormones to go into recovery. Well, where most of us are missing the recovery phase. And so, you combine adaptogens. This is what I do. I combine adaptogens with herbs that help in the recovery phase so that your body has all the fuel it needs to actually have a proper response and a proper recovery.
And we know, Roger, that it's not all about the herbs. It supports. So
right,
there are actually other things that are going to be foundational, and this is going to have to be how you actually react to that response. How well you're sleeping,
right.
The nutrition, your exercise, your community, your relationships. These are all key fundamental. We're not going to supplement your way out of any type of a health problem, but adaptogens, because the non-specific response to any stressor, positive, negative on the body, these have been found to be extremely helpful in the recovery phase. Now, can we discuss maybe some very specific blends or types of adaptogens that you have found useful and that they have been clinically studied too, to some degree?
Right. No, there's quite a few. Two come to mind that actually have been shown in clinical trials to reduce cortisol. But, cortisol, again, is just a small part of stress. Mm-hmm. It's about how your body is able to regulate itself. And, like anything in the health market, things get hyped. Things all of a sudden now, 20 years ago we had 3 or 4 adaptogens, and now we have 40 of them or something. But in my mind, if an adaptogenic herb does not regulate HPA axis, it's not an adaptogenic herb. It's not a true adaptogen. So I stick in my formulas, I stick to eleuthero ginseng, ashwagandha, reishi mushroom, schizandra. These are the types of herbs I base my practice on and my formulas, because they work. They do have a pronounced effect on your glandular system and the regulation of it.
Now, Roger, do you find singly or in combination when we're putting adaptogens together in your formulations, will a single adaptogen work, or do you find when you're adding several, because of their non-specific responses to the body and the stress adaptation, which do you find your greatest success has been?
Well, I find a greater success combining them.
Okay.
And both of my major stress formulas are a combination of the 4 herbs I mentioned and another one called rhodiola, which I left out. But rhodiola has a major effect on your pituitary, and that's where I find that its strength is. It's a very powerful herb for that. And this is what you find with most adaptogens. Each one of them has a particular strength, a part of your body that it's a little better at regulating. Like eleuthero ginseng, I find to be more of an adrenal restorative than a regulator of stress, even though it does regulate stress a bit. But reishi mushroom in particular is really good for your pituitary, very good for your thyroid gland, affects your adrenal glands. So it's more of a balanced herb. So they all have their strengths and weaknesses. And that's why I like to use a combination of each to get that full spectrum effect.
Okay, and with this full spectrum effect, I think it's great when you're combining everything. Now, with sourcing, because like with anything, there are a lot of supplements out there and even energy recovery drinks, I'm finding that they're using adaptogens. It seems to be everyone's on the bandwagon now because they realize how awesome it is. But the caveat here, like with any supplement or drug, quality is not always the same. Like with your blends you're using, and for your experience, what are you using to source and find the most pure blends, and also the concentration you're using?
Well, this is the important thing about herbs, is all quality. If you look at a product on the market and everything just says 4-to-1 extract or 5-to-1 extract, which is what the industry went through years ago, thinking that if they standardized things, it would be better. Well, eleuthero ginseng, which I use, is a 40-to-1 extract. So if you're getting a 5-to-1 of eleuthero, I don't know how there's anything in it, really, because eleuthero ginseng, it's wood. It's a piece of wood. It looks like something that you hit with your lawnmower, And that, and when you have that piece of wood, it takes 40 pounds of it to extract enough active ingredient out of it to get a pound of extract. So if you're doing a 5-to-1, there can't be much in it. Reishi mushroom can be anywhere from a 12 to 15-to-1 because that's a woody mushroom. Depending on how dry it is when they harvest it, that's going to require a different extract. Ashwagandha might be an 8 to a 10-to-1 extract. Every herb is different. You have to know how that herb extracts the best to its natural blend of active ingredient. If you take an herb like reishi mushroom, 10 years ago it was popular that they would take reishi and extract it out to one chemical and be a 50-to-1. But what you find out is that energetically that herb was dead. There was no connection to its herbal properties. It was one chemical. One chemical is like taking a drug. You get some effect, but it's going to be harsh. It's not going to be like the effect of the herb as a food going into your body and how your body recognizes herbs as foods. So we have every single herb in our formulas extracted by itself. We don't put it all in one tea like they like to do and extract it all at one time, because there's herbs in my formula that work fantastic at 5-to-1, some are 8-to-1, some are 10-to-1s, some are 40-to-1s. You have to know that and get it all extracted on its own and then blended together to make your own particular formula.
Well, great. And I know you have decades of experience doing this, and the stress response being very non-specific and doing those lifestyle things with adding additional supplementation, nutraceutical, but more specifically here, the adaptogens, because they do help the stress response. I mean, I can attest to that. I have had my own health crisis. I have found adaptogens have been very helpful for that. And even your product, he and she, myself personally, I've been using it for almost a year now, and it's part of my morning routine. Also with meditation, gratitude, and just making sure I get a good night's sleep, that does help with the stress response.
Well, one of the things with adaptogens too is that in all the research, what they're actually talking about as the benefits you get from it all are attached to a certain dose. There's a certain quality and a certain dose you have to take for a period of time. The problem with most products on the market is that they don't use that dose. They don't come anywhere near to what you're supposed to have. And I see this a lot with energy drinks. Anytime you get an energy drink in a can or a bottle that has herbs in it, I can guarantee you there's hardly enough herb in that product to do anything to you, because you can't mix that much herb in a liquid without having to use a ton of preservatives and not using too much herb, because it'll kill the taste. You can't make a soda pop out of a bunch of herbs, because there won't be enough in it to do anything. It's just a soda pop.
Yeah, and this is a great lead-in for the stress response. Now, the stress response does regulate a lot of things. But how about even more specifically when we're talking about, say, brain function, when we're talking about mood, when we're talking about, say, sexuality, infertility, and all these things? Can you discuss maybe even more focused areas?
Think about just brain function to start out with. When you're locked into a stress response, your energy has dropped down into the oldest part of your brain, which is just fight or flight. And that's where your energy resides. You're no longer utilizing the frontal lobe of your brain, which is about creativity, seeing the big picture, really having fun. All these different things are associated with a different part of your brain. If you're always locked in the stress response, you're locked into seeing everything as a threat to your survival. So you spend the whole day at work, and every interaction you have is based on the fact that you think you have to get it over on someone to survive. And that's generally what happens to people that are locked into chronic stress. Now, an adaptogen, because it focuses on different glands in your brain, hypothalamus, pituitary, naturally when that regulates itself, you're no longer stuck down in fight or flight. You make it real easy for you to relax and go back up into the part of your brain, for instance, the frontal lobe, which is associated with your pituitary. It makes it easier to go back into parts of your brain that have to do with higher thought, higher thinking, calm, having fun, that type of aspect of your life. And so it changes your brain in how it energetically communicates with each other, something they call coherence. And that means your whole brain is activated and not just a part that tells you that you're in danger. And that's one of the best parts about it, because once you do that, once your whole brain is activated and communicating, then it affects your mood, because even your mood is associated with certain glands in your brain and the chemicals that are predominantly made in that area of your brain. You'll have more of a dopamine response if you're in the frontal lobe of your brain, more of an acetylcholine response in another part of the brain. There's different aspects of your brain that if they're all turned on and it's flowing, then you have the best possibility of feeling how you want to feel, which is uplifted and in the moment and having a little bit of fun.
Yeah, I can relate to that because I know during my time in my life where I had significant stress, besides not sleeping, there's that brain fog. I just can't focus at all, and my ability to focus was very short term, and I would be easily distracted, and I would have brain fatigue. And that was a very difficult, very frustrating thing because I lost that creativity, that drive, and I realized it affects everything else in your life.
Oh yeah, so you're constantly stressed, then you're not digesting your food properly, and you're probably eating too much sugar, and then you're not making most of the chemicals your brain needs to actually feel uplifted and relaxed anyway. You know, like serotonin. Everybody thinks serotonin's a brain chemical. Well, yeah, it is. It's a neurotransmitter, but where do you produce that?
It's in the gut.
It's in the gut.
It's in the gut.
And if you're not eating the food that helps you with that, and you're stressed and you're not digesting and processing, and you have too much inflammation, what happens? You don't have enough serotonin.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we realize there is more going on with the gut and the brain. So we're finding in the functional world and outside of the conventional that the gut relates to everything. So there's a gut-brain axis, a gut-skin axis, and when we talk about mood, we were talking about dopamine, serotonin. There's about, I can't remember, it was about 80 to 90% of your serotonin is produced in the gut, the enteric nervous system. And also dopamine is about 40%. Of course, there's a link between the vagus nerve and the brain, how it all communicates. You've heard that saying, I have a gut feeling. Well, listen to it. It's not the brain chemicals, it's the gut chemicals.
The gut chemicals. And, you know, it's fascinating because almost every adaptogen now in latest research is associated with one of the neurotransmitters. So why is that? Because there's neurotransmitters in that herb? No, I think it's just because it makes that gland in that part of your brain healthier. And when you're in a relaxed, healthy state, your body produces what it needs to produce to stay in a state of balance. When you're stressed, your body doesn't produce anything. When you basically go into full-on stress, it shuts off the ability to regenerate anything. And so, but that's the mode most people are locked into. They're locked into that state to where their body cannot regenerate and produce the things they need for normal living and just survival.
So let's talk a little bit about stress and the taboo sex function. As we know, stress, the last thing your body wants to do is reproduce when you're under stress.
Right.
And what are we seeing today? Because we're in this chronic underlying state of stress, the body does not know the difference between an argument you had with your spouse, stuck in traffic, financial problems, or being chased by the lion. It doesn't know the difference. The body's response is the same. And if you have this chronic underlying stress going on, how does that affect not only your gut health, but your sexual health?
Well, you know, in Chinese herbology, your sexual energy is part of something they call Jing, which your kidney adrenal is the main driver for that. And so if your adrenals are imbalanced due to overproduction of chemicals due to stress response, then it's like having your car battery maybe running at a 10% charge. Your car is going to suffer in some way, and one of these days it just won't start, right? There won't be that power source there. And that's what you kind of look at, the adrenals in Chinese herbology. They look at your adrenals as the battery in the middle of your back, lower back, that powers up your reproductive system, is involved in the health of your skeletal system. It's involved in powering up your brain. And so when that becomes weakened or it's imbalanced due to too much stress and outlay of different hormones, and it can't go into recovery, your whole sexual energy suffers. You get brain fog. There's all these different things that happen to you. One of the most common ones is you have this unending backache that people think they've always injured themselves, but generally it's just a loss or a lack of energy in a certain system of your body.
Yeah, and we also know that the HPA axis, when it comes to musculoskeletal health, can affect that too. And when you're under chronic stress, your body is not there to reproduce. It's not there to digest. It's there to deal with the stressor at hand. And we realize that working on the stress response, again, as you said earlier on, 80-90% of health complaints or things that we deal with comes from our reaction to stress.
Stress. You know, I have a great story. I was on vacation once in Costa Rica. And normally, when I was living in LA, I'm in traffic every day, I'm in stressful work, all this. I used to get a lot of headaches from eating eggs. And I thought maybe I'm allergic to eggs, I should never eat them. And then I went on vacation in Costa Rica, and if you've ever been there, standard breakfast is black beans, rice, eggs, tortillas, right? Every day, breakfast. It's just what it is, right? Never got a headache in Costa Rica. Laying on the beach every day and having my eggs for breakfast, never had a problem.
You were on vacation and no stress.
Never had any problems with my digestion. Never had any problems.
Imagine that. Then you came back to the real world.
Came back, had an omelet, went to work, got a headache.
Yeah, imagine that.
So stress in your nervous system has a major impact on everything. And the first one you notice right away is digestive issues.
And what are some of those digestive issues people may start dealing with when everything is taken away? So basically the stress response actually decreases, if you want to get a little technical, something called secretory IgA. And this is a lining on the gut that is the first response to any stressors. And any change in that actually breaks down the gut lining, which we've talked about before, which you can start having intestinal hyperpermeability or a leaky gut. And that can lead to at least some gut symptoms. You can have gas, bloating, indigestion. Certain foods may cause brain fog, fatigue, and just lack of energy. And again, it all starts there when you have that breakdown, the stress causing that. The
breakdown, the stress, and you know, it's common in Chinese medicine that we deal with a lot of people that have what they call GERD or acid reflux. And surprisingly, how they deal with that is just through stress formulas. They give you something that moves your liver, which in Chinese medicine is how they say nervous system, liver. And so you regulate your liver because they have this one disease state that they refer to as liver invading spleen. Basically what it means is that you're so uptight that your liver doesn't let your food move through your system. It just sits there. And it sits there for 3 times longer than it's supposed to because you're so tense, nothing's moving. So you relax your nervous system, all of a sudden your digestion works again and everything just moves.
Yeah, imagine that. And when we talk about digestion, the stress actually cuts down the acid production in your gut. And it's called hypochlorhydria. And we realize right now on the conventional system, if you have reflux, they're going to give you a proton pump inhibitor, which decreases the acid production. And believe it or not, you need acid to break down the enzymatic factors of food. It actually is the first line protection against bacteria and other pathogens. It's not an acid problem. We're finding that it's a digestion problem. So a lot of the food that you're taking in, it doesn't digest. What does it do? It ferments. And where does it go? It goes up. And that's when you're getting these symptoms of heartburn, indigestion, belching. So actually suppressing that acid, natural acid from the stomach is actually counterproductive and potentially has long-term consequences.
This fermentation stuff, it's kind of dovetails right into the fact that most people are eating 10 times more sugar than they're supposed to anyway, and so it just adds to the fermentation,
adds to the fire,
and
so
you
to
just
speak.
have all this inflammation and stuff going on and bloating in your digestion. And you know, the fact is, people over 40 start to lose their stomach acid anyway. If you're in your 50s and 60s, you probably have half as much stomach acid as you did when you were 20. So taking antacids on top of that just makes your problem worse. And I remember when I got in the health field, clear back in the early 80s, the standard remedy to see if you had good digestion was to just have a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. And if it made your stomach a little sour, you had great digestion. And if it didn't, you needed to take it.
Yeah. Now, since we're on that and we're talking about stress, let's give our audience that's watching this maybe some tips to better health with digestion. And first of all, I think consciously eating and getting rid of distractions is probably one of the first things we want to do. So if you're actually going to be eating, avoid any media, avoid anything that may cause a stress response. So that's the first thing.
Right.
And actually, digestion starts with smell, and it starts to secrete enzymes, the salivary enzymes, which helps break down food. So when you're chewing, just don't chew and swallow. They're recommending between 30 to 40 times. And that does help break down the products for the macronutrients in the gut. So there's a very simple tip you could do there.
You know, one of the things that you can easily do, takes about a minute and a half, is to just breathe. You know, we talked a little bit earlier about sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic means you're locked up into your stress. You're in a stress response. Parasympathetic means you're more present and you're aware and your body's doing its natural processes again, right? So most people, because they're at work, are locked into this response. And so the easiest way to get out of it, to become present, is just close your eyes and pay attention to breathing into your nose for about the count of 8. Hold it for the count of 8. Breathe out of your mouth for the count of 8. Do that 5 or 6 times, and you've shut off sympathetic nervous system, went into parasympathetic. But don't get stressed out about whether you remember you did it 5 or 6 times. You just need to do it, right?
Yeah, so now you are actually programming your brain and HPA axis to be in a parasympathetic, rest to digest, before you actually put yourself in the activity of eating. And when you do so, avoid the distractions, the adequate chewing. And here's another thing: when we talk about acid in the stomach, do not guzzle down a lot of fluids, because you're actually going to dilute the acidity in your stomach, which is needed for digestion. So the suggestion is just a couple of sips to keep your mouth moist, and the majority of your fluids should be consumed at the end of the meal.
No, you might think that breathing technique sounds too simple and it doesn't do anything to you, but I actually remember listening to an interview once where this doctor took a man who was overweight, had extreme amounts of stress, digestive issues, and tried to put him on a program. And one of the things he found out was that the guy ate at McDonald's every day. He loved Big Macs and fries and Cokes, right? And he ate it all the time driving his pickup truck around town. And he said to the guy, look, I'll try and clean up my diet, but I'm never going to quit eating at McDonald's. I love that food, right? So the guy just got him to promise not to eat while he was driving, because if you're driving, you're stressed out, right? So don't eat when you're driving, and do this breathing technique. So he did it, and in 3 weeks he lost 15 pounds.
Wow.
And he told the guy, you know what, now that I'm paying attention, I don't like McDonald's food. It stinks. He goes, I can't stand it. He goes, you've ruined my whole lunch. He goes, because I never paid attention to what I was eating.
How important is that, to pay attention to what we do?
Yeah.
It's great.
And again, that's what stress, dealing with your stress, is about. It's about becoming aware and paying attention to what you do.
Yeah. So let's wrap this up. So we basically have learned a little bit about the history of adaptogens and several of them, and how it modulates the stress response, and how being in a sympathetic state breaks down so many areas of your health, and how it is related to lots of health conditions and complaints. And then again, how important digestion is. Digestion disease begins and ends in the gut. And that's, again, full circle around to even today. We're finding out even more so how important that is. Do you have any final words that we can leave with those that are watching today, or any other tips or suggestions?
I would like to say that people have to get away from this idea of stress as being something they need to sedate themselves out of, and something that they're going to find an herbal tranquilizer for, or go to the doctor and get an antidepressant, because stress is really about helping your body do its natural process of regulation, which is homeostasis, and allowing you to be in a healthy enough state to become aware, to avoid overreacting to stress, to recover from stress, and actually get healthier. You know, like my formulas for stress, inner peace and Tianqi, there's so much more than just a stress formula. They're a full body tonic for your heart, your liver, your kidney, adrenal. They actually build up and strengthen weaknesses in your body. And that's what you want to focus on. You want to become strong and have enough energy to feel vital and alive, and then start to thrive in your life.
Perfect. And also realizing there's so much talk again with the negativity of stress, but realize stress is not a bad thing. It builds resiliency. It actually builds. But it's a matter of how we deal with it and how we adjust our lives to put ourselves in a more parasympathetic state, as opposed to the chronic sympathetic state of fight or flight. So, Roger, on that, I appreciate your time and talking with you again today.
Oh, it was great.
We'll be doing it again real soon.
All right, fantastic. Thank you.